Numbers are in, and they are not all that good. Certainly not what we were hoping for. Here we go. Consumer Price Index, essentially the inflation number. Month over month is up 0.6%. That is the biggest monthly increase in the Consumer Price Index since June of 2022. Year over year, 3.7%. The expectations were 3.6%. So right about the expectations. But remember, the Fed's target is 2% inflation. Came in at nearly double that, at 3.7%. So what does the Fed do now? I think they're going to keep hiking rates. That's all they can do. The Fed has to keep increasing interest rates to get the inflation number down to 2%. They can't force this government, this administration, to promote supply-side economics. There's two ways to get prices down. You decrease demand or you increase supply. Those are the only two options that you have. The Fed cannot increase supply of goods. That's impossible. The only tool they have in their toolbox is to decrease demand by increasing interest rates, which will put downward pressure and, prevent people from taking out loans and, cars and second mortgages and all those things. That's the only way that they can cool off the economy and get the inflation rate down, is to continue to increase interest rates. So Jerome Powell, I don't think he wants to do it, but he's not going to have a choice with these numbers. August core CPI inflation up 0.3%. Now, that is when you remove food and energy. And we have seen an increase in gas prices as well. So that's a big driver here, I imagine, of the month-over-month and year-over-year number. But even when you strip out food and energy and you get the core CPI, that came in above expectations, 0.3 versus 0.2. And you might not think that's a big deal, but 0.3 is 50% higher than 0.2. So, you're off by 50%. So none of this is good. Jerome Powell's not going to be happy about this. The administration should not be happy about this. I'm not happy about it. It's not like, I don't care what it means politically right now. It's just, it's not good that the American people are continuing to feel the pain and the pinch of inflation. Now, you might go around to certain parts of your community and say, I don't see inflation. And you're not going to see it, by the way, in certain pockets of, let's say, Johnson County. You're just not going to see it. I mean, people are paying $800 for a Taylor Swift ticket. I get it. You're not going to see it there. But that's where people have to get out of their bubbles. And you are going to see it as you go down the socioeconomic ladder, because that's where inflation hits the most. Inflation is a regressive tax. The lower you go down on the socioeconomic food chain, the more it impacts you. If you're living comfortably in, certain parts of the Kansas City region, that's great. I mean, I'm happy for all of us who are, but just understand that you not feeling the increase in gas or eggs or milk or anything like that doesn't mean that there aren't millions of Americans who are. And that's where the disconnect really is. So not a great number, but also more or less in line with what the expectations were. So the markets look like they're about steady right now. They're set to open up in, 50 minutes or so is when the markets open up. And right now, the futures are right about even. So we'll keep an eye on that as we roll through the morning here on KCMO and see how the markets ultimately do react to this news of the inflation rate, the consumer price index coming in at 3.7% year over year. Just getting the breaking news push notification on my phone from the Wall Street Journal. So we beat the Wall Street Journal push notification. That's why this is where you got to be. My push notification here from the Wall Street Journal. Breaking news. Inflation picked up in August as gas prices jumped, but underlying price pressure stayed mostly mild. That is from the Wall Street Journal. Push notification 2 minutes ago. So we beat them. Let's go, baby. Woo! Oh, my goodness. Welcome in. I got this note from a buddy of mine. His name is Steve. He's a Kansas City resident who, loves his town, loves his community, small business owner. And he sent this to me yesterday. It says, last night, all the cars on 114th Street from State Line to Holmes Road were broken into. It's 1 block south of where he lives. It's a nice part of town. And that happened last night. He said these criminals broke windows on all the cars, rummaged through the cars, and everything else. He said on the last home, the homeowner walked out on them while in his car, and they fired shots at the guy. Luckily, he didn't get hit. He said the cops caught these guys, supposedly, and arrested them. And then he says, hopefully the damn Kansas City, Missouri, meaning Jackson County prosecutor, gives them real jail time. And then he sent me the ring video of the shots being fired. This is a nice part of Kansas City, right? This is, for lack of a better word, this is not in a rough neighborhood. And you've got people on 114th Street from State Line to Holmes Road, all of them having their cars broken into and having their windows smashed as criminals rummage through the vehicles. At what point? I mean, we are coming off city elections, right? And Kansas City voters just elected the most progressive city council in city history. At what point do some of these voters, who I understand are going to view themselves as traditional Democrats, and you know what? In city settings, that's what I would expect. But at what point do you realize that being a traditional Democrat is so much different than being a far left city councilman, a leftist, whatever word you want to use? It is completely different right now. I mean, heck, even 20, 25 years ago, you think of the Bill Clinton, Democratic Party. That party was not about defunding the police. That party was not about, slapping criminals on the wrist and letting them out of jail because they're victims of society. They're the real victims, not you that just got your car broken into. The criminals are actually the victims here because of how society and how this country has treated them. That's not the kind of stuff that either party bought into up until maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago. And then, of course, George Floyd sent that whole concept on steroids and made it fairly mainstream. But that was never mainstream, really, until the last 3.5 years. But now you've got high-quality individuals in nice parts of Kansas City dealing with this kind of crime. And what have I said for 3 years now about crime? When it started increasing dramatically during COVID in the wake of George Floyd and everything else. I said it's not going to stay in the little pockets. Eventually, it's going to spread. It's going to spread across Kansas City. It's going to spread to other parts of the region. It's not going to care a lot about a state line road. It's going to start in one area. And then, as criminals get more brazen and look to other parts, they will continue to venture out. Right, John? You've been around forever. I've said this since the beginning of this conversation.
Sure, and we talked about a recent example in Minneapolis, Shivanthi Sananthardan, I believe is her name. She was all defund the police in the George Floyd thing until she got beamed and got robbed in front of her kids.
In front of her kids. She got beat up by criminals in front of her kids a couple of weeks ago. And she was a rah-rah defund the police-er up in Minneapolis. And now she's like, where are the cops to save me? Well, you reap what you sow here. I mean, that's what we're living through right now for so many. Now, my buddy of mine who sent me this Ring doorbell video right there on 114th and Holmes Road, I mean, he has been steadfast since day one on this insanity and trying to push back against it. But now he's an innocent bystander of what is awful progressive policies in Kansas City. There's no other way to spin it. You're down 400 cops. You've got a prosecutor who slaps people on the wrist. And there's not one city, by the way. Find me the one city that's been run by individuals with this mindset that's gotten better over the last 3 years. Find me one. I'll keep waiting because you're not going to find one, by the way. You're not. I mean, these ideals that have permeated major American cities over the last 3 years we are at a tipping point with them. They are very, very vulnerable over the next 15 months. The question is, are the American people going to wake up? Are the Kansas City residents going to wake up? It's hard to tell right now because we didn't have an actual mayoral race. I mean, all we could drum up is Clay Chastain against Quentin Lucas. I wanted a good race. It would have been good for us, but there was no race to speak of. I said from day one, when we knew it was Mayor Q and Clay, that Clay was going to get blown out, and he did. It wasn't a real race. But these ideas, I'm telling you, they are very vulnerable right now under the right messaging. 913-408-7710. How you join us on KCMO Talk Radio? Should I do it? Yeah, whatever. We'll do it. This is maybe the best opinion piece I've read, at least in recent memory, in the Kansas City Star. It's actually very good. It calls out the hypocrisy of some in Johnson County, and I will share that with you coming up next.